Days of the week. How do you name them? Different languages seem to have different strategies for it, with the simplest being just to number them, although we still haven't figured out which day is supposed to be first. Some languages number almost all of them, some most of them, and some maybe half. And most importantly, why is there 7? Can we talk about that for a while? Everyone loves making fun of Americans for their funny units of measurement, but we all use the same units to measure time, and they're absolutely despicable. 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, 24 hours in a day, 7 days in a week. A month doesn't even have an integer number of weeks, it has like 30 days-ish, but it differs month by month and not even in a simple pattern. So you need to use that dumbass knuckle trick if you have bad memory. 12 months in a year, which is also 365 days, but oh, by the way, every 4 years the shortest month gets 1 more day because the Earth takes an additional 6 hours to orbit the Sun each year. Not to mention time zones, which make no sense, daylight savings, which doesn't happen everywhere, and where it doesn't happen at the same time, or the fact that this is all used to measure something that constantly changes as we speak. How do we live like this? Anyway, let's go back to naming days of the week. Numbering them is simple, but it's not what most languages do. If you've read the title of this video and then you look at these two sets of names, you might wonder, well, these don't look similar at all, but bear with me. I first noticed the parallel between European and East Asian names for days of the week when I attempted to learn French at the ripe age of 23. Before that, I knew basically nothing about any Romance languages, and I never put much thought into the etymology of English days of the week, and it's not really obvious at first glance. In French, however, I quickly realized that most days are named after Roman gods. These names originate from Latin, so I had to figure out what prompted Romans to name days of the week after certain gods. But you know what else is named after gods? That's right, planets. As it turns out, Babylonians did that, Greeks stole that system, and then Romans stole the Greek system, and also Greek gods, and renamed them. The reason this was applied to days of the week was because of something called planetary hours. You see, the order of these names seems to be pretty random, but it's not, it's just complicated. These 7 bodies are referred to as classical planets, even though 2 of these aren't planets, but originally planet meant wanderer, and these objects move across the sky, so you get the idea. This order comes from the Ptolemaic system, which is a geocentric model in which the Earth is in the center, as the name suggests, and other bodies move around it. Their distance from Earth was established based on their apparent movement speed in the sky, so it's almost right if you swap the Earth and the Sun. Since the Sun moves in the sky as fast as the Earth goes around it, it makes sense in this model, and obviously the Moon orbits the Earth, not the Sun, which is why it appears to be the fastest. Or something like that, I'm not sure. I was never really good at science. This order was the basis for the planetary hour system. In it, each hour of the day was governed by one of these planets, in the order from farthest to closest to Earth. 24 is not divisible by 3, so each day in a 7-day cycle would start with an hour governed by the planet 3 positions apart from the previous one. And so each day of the week was named after the planet that governed the first hour of that day. This gives us the order we're all familiar with: Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. This system eventually spread to other parts of Europe. It was mostly preserved in Romance languages, except for Portuguese, although Sunday was renamed to the Day of the Lord and Saturday was named after the Sabbath. Just like Romans had a huge boner for Greeks, so did Germanic peoples for Romans, so they adopted the system as well. But instead of just stealing the stolen Roman mythology, they tried to find parallels between their own deities and the Roman ones. This is known as Interpretatio Germanica. And so Sunday and Monday are named after the personifications of the sun and the moon. Tuesday is the day of Tyr or Tiel, the equivalent of Mars. Wednesday is the day of Odin or Woden. Thursday is the day of Thor. Friday is the day of Frigg. And Saturday is the day of Saturn. I guess they didn't have an equivalent for that. That's all well and good, but what does it have to do with Japanese? Well, my eureka moment when learning French came when I remembered the names of planets in Japanese, and I was like, wait a second, this looks oddly familiar. Look at that, it's a perfect match. But that raises 2 questions. One, how did this system end up in Japan of all places? The answer is that it first spread to China around the 3rd or 4th century and then to Japan in the 10th century, where it was originally used for astrology, but then for regular calendars in the Meiji period, also known as the Japanese Westabu period. I won't go into details about older Chinese calendars because there's like 80 of them, but some vocabulary is still retained in modern Chinese or Japanese. For example, at some point they had 30-day months divided into 3 weeks, and these words are still in use to refer to the first, second, and third 10 days of the month. The second question is, sure, Sunday and Monday are named after the sun and the moon, but what about the rest? Some of you may recognize these 5 symbols as wuxing, or the Chinese 5 elements. These are applied to a whole plethora of categories, including colors, seasons, cardinal directions, and yes, planets as well. As to why those elements specifically were assigned to their respective planets, unfortunately I haven't found any conclusive evidence about, except for Mars is fire because it's red, Venus is metal because,
he's white.
And according to Japanese Wikipedia, Mercury is water because water flows fast and Mercury also moved fast, so, yeah, I don't know where they got that information from, so take it with a grain of salt. This character actually originally referred to the 7 classical planets, and the word for day was stuck to the end, which meant the day associated with that planet. In modern Chinese and Japanese, planets instead use the character for star, so that old character now means day of the week, at least in Japanese and also Korean, which uses the same system as Japan. In China, they decided to ditch this system and call days of the week star periods. So there you go, that's the explanation. This absolutely blew my mind when I first noticed it, and it remains as one of my favorite moments in my language learning history. If you've ever noticed a similar unexpected connection between 2 completely unrelated languages, let me know in the comments. And if you're an English speaker learning Japanese, good news! You don't have to memorize days of the week, just remember that Wednesday is the day of Woden, or Odin, who's the Germanic equivalent of Mercury, after whom a planet is also named, and in Japanese, Mercury is the planet of water, which you can remember if you've ever watched Sailor Moon, and so Wednesday is also the day of water. Simple as.